If you have already figured out how to video your kids' games, editing game film will not be too hard for you. You can figure this out. Here, I'll help. Before we open up iMovie, we want to make sure that we have video on our iPad to work with. If you've been using a GoPro, if you've been using your cell phone, if you've been using a point and shoot, if you've been using a high-dollar DSLR, if you've been using a Mevo for your game film recording, you're going to want to get that video off of the camera and onto either a solid state drive that you can now edit off of, since we are in iPad OS 15, or onto the iPad itself. The easiest way to do that is going to be with a physical connection. I know that a lot of cameras will allow you to have a wireless connection between your camera and the iPad. However, that is a slow download when you're talking about a video file. If your camera uses an SD card, just pop the SD card out, put it in an adapter that will fit into the USB-C or Lightning port of your iPad, and you have a much faster transfer into your camera roll. If you have a cable that connects your camera to your iPad, that works just as well. It should be, if not as fast, pretty close to as fast. So once you have your video on the camera, we go into iMovie. When we get to this opening screen, it's going to give us the option of the big plus here. Now, we'll find all of our previous projects on this screen, but we are starting a new project today. We can import a project from another device if we want by using the ellipsis in the top left-hand corner, but today we'll start by clicking the plus and then choosing Movie as our choice. Now, from here, we start with a beginning file. It's only going to pull from your camera roll in this screen, so you want to make sure that the file you're choosing is actually in the camera roll. It starts at moments. That's the default place to start. You can choose video if you want to narrow it down to just videos, but you may want to start with a photo. It would be like using a freeze frame to start with the beginning of what you want to do. I'm just going to start with one, so I have a place to start. This one is 22 seconds long. It's just a clip from a baseball game. And since we're talking about editing game film, that's probably a great place to start. Create Movie is the next thing to tap, and it brings that clip into iMovie. Now, what we see on the screen here, once the clip has been imported, we see several things on the screen. Now, iMovie for iPad has a very minimalistic design, but it's feature-packed at the same time. Nothing seems to be wasted. Every icon is useful, and most of them lead to more options. If we look at the screen here, we're going to see we have some information across the top right-hand side. This little question mark icon toggles on and off some pointers. And the first couple of times you use iMovie, they're actually very helpful. I used them the first 2 or 3 videos that I ever produced with iMovie, and I would turn them on and off as needed so I could remember where those particular features were depending on what I was working on at the time. I'll turn them back off now by tapping on that icon again. The one next door to it, the little settings wheel, is going to show us that we have project filters that will affect everything we bring into this particular project. We can theme our project according to the mood, so to speak, of what we're doing. I'm leaving mine on simple. We can turn on the theme soundtrack, which will put what it deems to be an appropriate soundtrack behind your video, your fade ins, your fade outs, and whether the speed changes pitch or not if you're going to be doing a video that changes speed. I'm not going to make any changes in this area at this point. Now, while we're at this top, let me go ahead and talk about the plus. This is the place where we go to get more video clips. So you can start with your first clip. You don't have to go in and choose all of them at the very beginning of your project. You can just have the one. But then you notice that when we get into this section, we don't just have camera roll anymore. We now have files included as well. So if you have your solid state drive attached to your iPad and you need to go into it to pull some other video, there's the avenue to do so. Even though it only gives you camera roll only at the beginning of your project, here is where you go to find other pieces of media. At the bottom of that same part of the window, you also see that there is audio to be put in whether sound effects, music, or your own music that can be put in there. I do want to let you be aware, if this is for public consumption, just be careful of choosing copyrighted material. I'm not going to choose anything else yet because there's a lot more on the screen that we get to talk about before we get into adding another clip. As we come down below the clip that below the preview window of the clip that we have added, we can see a microphone on the left, which will allow us to do a voiceover. We see the camera icon, which would allow us to actually use the camera to bring more video in. Now that added that video in the place where the cursor, I guess they call that a cursor in iMovie, where that was. So this, at the beginning of this one, if I had scrolled over so that that cursor was at the end, it would have added it at the end. There is an undo button. We'll use that to take that video right back out. And then there is the audio, which shows or clears the waveform for the audio that is in your video. Now, we said this was a minimalistic design, and other than all the way back to the beginning and play, that's all we have on this particular screen. But when we tap on and select the clip that we pulled in, we're going to see several other options show up. And this is where the actual editing is going to happen. Now, I'm going to point you back up to the top one more time before we deal with what's at the bottom, and that is this little plus that just popped up. It wasn't there when that wasn't selected, but as soon as the clip is selected, we see the plus, and that's going to let us zoom in. Now, I have this as a screen recording of a clip that I pulled from my Sideline HD account, or maybe from my YouTube channel. But as you can see, it has a massive black border around it. And so in order to bring this up to fill the screen, I can choose the plus. That's going to pop out some instructions that says pinch to zoom. I will do just what it said. I'll pinch to zoom so that this picture fills the entire preview screen. I can move it around by 2-finger scrolling on the touchpad that's attached to my iPad, or I could do the same by just touching in the frame and dragging it around. Now that I have that zoomed in to where I want it, I can go back to the bottom here. So once I have this selected, I have several actions at the bottom of the screen. Now, once I'm in the action set of this menu, each of these lower ones brings up a different set of options. We'll start with actions, and you can see that within actions, I can split this clip into pieces. I can then edit in or out from there so that if there's pieces of this clip that I don't want, I don't have to keep. I can detach the audio from it, and the benefit of detaching audio is often that we want to move our audio a little bit. Sometimes we have cuts that we want to make, and we want the audio to start just a little bit before the video does. It's called a J cut. It's a very effective tool to draw our attention to the next thing before we actually see it with our eyes. And then we have the duplicate function, which of course is duplicating that piece if you ever want to do that for later in your video. I'm going to go ahead and show you what it's like to split this. Now, if I'm looking at this video, I see that the kid running from first to second is just about to slide. Catch has already been made. I'm going to split it right there. So I tap on the clip. I choose split, and now I have the two pieces. They are split in my view, but it doesn't change how they act as the video actually plays. However, if I want to freeze frame there, then I can go back. Let's see, I think I'll do it from the other perspective, from the second half. I'll do it from there. I'll look at my speed options, and I can choose to freeze. So that now when I play this, if there's audio to go on top of it, let's see what it looks like when we play. We'll switch cameras, kid's running, freeze frame. And there he goes. It's an effective little tool to draw your attention back to what is about to happen. Maybe even give yourself a couple of seconds to say something about it. That freeze frame is a nice little tool. We'll leave that where it is. Tap on the clip again, and I'm in the speed section. So if I need to speed up or slow down, I can. There's a reset button there as well. Volume is the next section, and if I find that my audio is too low, I can bring it up. If my audio is too hot, I can push it down. Doesn't really help with clipping sounds, so you do want to make sure that you're setting that before you film, but you do have some adjustment here. And then we see that there are titles that can be added. Titles are a great tool, especially whenever we're wanting to draw the attention to something that is specifically happening on the field. And so you see that iMovie gives you several choices of what your titles can be. And they've done little themes for each of those. And so you can tap on one, it puts it there. You can tap to change the title text. You can edit that or you can delete that. We'll edit that to say, thrown out. Very simple text that now exists for the duration of this clip when we play it. Now, I would need to go back in and take title text here out of. I can delete each of those because that's the whole thing. So I would have to actually click on that and delete it. We'll undo that, edit that and delete it, edit that and delete it, and now we have thrown out. It's a little bit high. See if we can drag it down some, move it out of the way of the play. So you can see that this is fully featured, and then when we come to this particular part of the clip, notice that the title does not show on the part before the split. It only shows on the part after the split. And if we don't want it to continue past the freeze frame, we can actually split again at the end of the freeze frame. Go back into Actions, Split, and now we just have thrown out in the freeze frame. So this is what that would look like as we played it. Switch cameras. Freeze frame as thrown out is on the screen. Thrown out goes away and you see the end of the play. Editing your video in iMovie is incredibly intuitive. If we don't want to see the end, and you can see this was a screen recording, so I want to clip off the end. I can either split it at the point that I want to split it, or I can just grab that thick yellow line there and I can drag it, click and drag that thick yellow line back to before that pops up, and now I've got a clean end. I don't have that extra on the screen. So from either direction, you can click and drag to edit the length of the in or the out. Now you do see a couple of little pieces that we haven't talked about in between the clips, and that is this square with a vertical line in it. That would be where a transition might go. As it stands now, there are no transitions here. It just goes smoothly from one to another, but there's a time when we do want transitions. So what I'm going to do is add another clip. I'll go back into my camera roll because I know I have another clip in here. It's not too far down. The yellow line on this one shows me that I'm already using this one in this project. So if I've got two that look a lot alike as I do here, I can tell the difference because of that yellow line. I'm going to choose the next one and the plus to add that one. Now in between these two, I'm going to want a transition. I don't necessarily want the transitions here because I want that to continue as is without it breaking up the continuity of the clip. But on switching from clip to clip, especially if I am adding several clips in series, either for the enjoyment of my family, for the enjoyment of the player himself, or for another coach that may want to look at the product that we have in that player, I'm going to want some kind of transition in between the individual clips. And so you see that instead of a box with a vertical line, this one has added a box with the dissolve function in it. If I tap here, just the same as if I tap on one of these others, I'm going to see that I have choices for transitions. Now, transition here is going to allow me to choose the length of the transition, and it's going to allow me to choose what the transition actually is. It can be themed according to whatever theme I've chosen. It can be dissolve, slide over, which would be like so, as one screen slides over the other. It can be wipe, as one screen would wipe over the other. Little bit different effect there. And then it can be fade, which is one of my favorites. It fades out to black and back in from black very quickly between the two clips. My other favorite is dissolve, and that's the default that I have set up here. And it's maybe the default for the app itself, but when we go from one clip to another, you'll just see them kind of cross fade between one another. Doesn't go to a color, it just fades between the two. So now I have two clips. I have a transition between them. I have added a freeze frame, and I've added a title. And those are probably the basics of what you would want to do in order to edit your game film, adding a new clip in, putting the next one in order, transitioning between them, titling when you want to, freeze framing when you want to, adjusting volume if it's needed, adjusting the length of each clip, and cutting off any unnecessary action that's at the beginning or the end. Now I do want to show you how to finish this, because it's just a project. Now there is a done button at the top left. Now I'm going to clear this window out so we just have the main part of the app open. I do want to make one more point about going back and forth into the project screen. For example, if I split this clip here, that split can be undone by choosing the undo function here on the right hand side. But if I split that clip, select it again and choose split, and I choose done to go back out to the project screen, when I open it up to edit it, I can no longer undo that split. So going back to done in the project screen is going to change things for us in that my series of actions are interrupted and I can no longer undo. So just be careful and know that that's the case. If you're going to be editing this for a lengthy amount of time, or if you're going to do this in a series of different sittings, you're going to sit and do this at different times, just be aware when you go back out to the project screen, you're not going to be able to undo the things you've done previously. All right, so going back to done to the project screen, and now I have the option of naming this by tapping on the title, and this is test project, so I'll just name it test, hit return, that names it. Now I can go back in and edit it. We just talked about that. I can play it and see what it looks like. If I'm not satisfied with it and I'm just ready to be done with it, I can trash it, but then I also have the option of sharing it. Now at this point, my choice is always to save video. That's going to put it in the camera roll, and that's the safest place, the easiest place to deal with on an iPad. So I can save that video, and it's going to export the media. Your movie was exported to your photo library, and now when I go into photos, I'm going to have that as my most recent item in my library, and there it is. So now we have it. Editing game film for your kids is as easy as that. I told you you could do it.